Welcome to Mending Threads. This is your safe place and your stronghold for whole body wellness. This is a transformation series. And today we want to look at what are we doing here each day. I wanted to just take some time to talk with you about the things that we walk around with, our assumptions, our thoughts, our feelings, and then how we can get so confused with who we think we are. And so, one of the things that I wanted to do is to answer some of the questions that have come in to me each day. So, one of the things that I want to say is we always saying, know thyself, know who you are. And I was sharing some stories on yesterday. How many of us actually look at ourselves being transformed each day? How many of us are thinking about the situations that we encounter each day and the impact that those situations have on us? So I wanted to. We've talked about the brain before. We've talked about our emotions, and one of the things is that we are regulating and we are redefining who we are each day. So when we take in information, when we encounter a situation, we are actually regrooving our brain to that and similar situations. So then, if what it is that we believe and how we use our time and in the moment determines how we regroove our brain. And then that takes care of what? That takes care of the now, and it looks at how we actually use the past. And it determines what we will do in the future. So one of the persons that I work with say often that when you're driving, if in fact you're looking in the rearview mirror, then you cannot see where you're going. You don't even see where you are because you're constantly looking in the rearview mirror. But if you glance in the rearview mirror and you look on either side, you are in a safety mode and you can also see where you're going. And this is what I'm saying. The safety mode is paying attention to where you are when you're looking at yourself traveling forward. So let's see how that makes sense. Let's assume that you are in a relationship, and the relationship that you're in has you constantly evaluating how you have made past mistakes, how you know that you could have done better. Well, what are you really saying to yourself? You're saying that you had not taken time to review that situation. You had not taken time to determine what was right for you, that you were moving a little bit too fast. So, what I'm saying is, let's move and take the thread from our previous relationships. So, let's make meaning of it. I'm going to give a situation. So, if you are a young man and you are constantly inviting the people that you meet when they're in trouble to come stay with you, and then once they're there for a few months, you feel that they're taking advantage of you, and you realize that they're eating your food. You end up making the wrong mistake for yourself. You're making wrong decisions. The longer you're with them, the more money you spend, the less you save. Then what are you saying? You're saying that you're not taking care of understanding the mistakes or the difficulties of the past because you're constantly using the same fears, the same emotions, and the same situation for the present. So now we must not linger in the past, but we need to itemize the two or three things that we see. We see that we might have a fear of being by ourselves. We might have a fear of not knowing how to speak up or be assertive in the situation to say that you are using too much of my items and not enough of yours. Not that I mind it, but I'm on a budget. Or you might need to learn how to communicate it in a loving manner. So now what we need to do is to look at that and bring it forth to the present. If you know this to be true and resonate within yourself, and then somebody said to me, Dr. Lewis, how do you know? How do you resonate something with yourself? Well, you close your eyes and you sit still for a minute and you feel it inside of your heart, whether or not you feel at peace with what you're discussing and what you're discussing with yourself and what you're talking about. If you make a decision based upon those difficulties, those fears, uh, and misrepresentations, and you don't feel settled, you still feel up in the air with questions, then you must stop because you're moving forward with a decision that is not going to be healthy, most likely, for you or the other person. What do is you stop. You give yourself time. You give yourself space to become mind, body, and spirit connected. So this is where we are. Then we can be where? In the present. And then you want to keep your mind on the situation. You're not looking at what the person didn't do last month or you didn't do now that you understand what your threads are, what your difficulties are. You want to now pay attention to, am I making a decision differently than I did before? Am I at peace with myself, mind, body, spirit? Or if I'm still unsettled, there's some information that I need. And I need to take time to get this information together because there is not a push. Who's the most important person? I am, because I give to others. And if I'm giving to others what is important, then I need to be at peace with myself to give me at peace to the individual. Otherwise, I'm going to be in conflict with myself and I'm going to have frequent periods of anger, frustration, those areas. So now we're in the present and we need to begin to look at some questions. What are my values? Who am I? What are the things that I prioritize? You understand? What's important to me? So somebody was telling me the other day, it was a young man and he's getting ready to move from his apartment and he was trying to make a decision. And he said, I wonder if I should sell my truck. And this was a big important. I wonder if I should, what I should do. Do I need to move in with my father? My amount that I'm spending is just too much. I'm spending $1,800 for my apartment. And I know that my fiance will help me. I know that my father will help me. But I'm also trying to be independent. My value is to be independent, although I have been independent for a very long time. So if I'm independent, if I want to be independent, then I must look at the value that I have for independent. Are my behaviors congruent? Are they systematic with my being independent, with my being healthy, with my being freed from stress, with my being mind, body, spirit aligned? So my questions of, I like my job. I do have difficulty on my job. So now how can I show that I like my job? How can I actually demonstrate that in the present? Because we're looking at the conflict that we have in our relationships and the things that we do. What you can do is you can then be consistent with being independent on your job, completion of your task, not missing any days of work that are not necessary. If you do, making up your hours of work, notifying the persons on your job, being consistently improving, find out ways that you can improve on your job, what's your move up categories, all of those areas. So now we're in the present. If we look too far in the future, we cannot do a good job in the relationship or on our job at this time because our energy and our force that we have within the job does not translate because we're constantly daydreaming. We're constantly energy with a low energy because it's not where we are now. So back to the young man with the situation with the truck, what we would want to do is begin to ask some questions. Am I trying to increase income and decrease debt, or am I trying to be comfortable? There are many other ways to do that, to answer other questions. And I'm sure some of you will write in at ips.health1@gmail.com and let me know, or leave a note on wrc-houston.com. I forgot to put it in the rolling notes. But what I want to hear is, what would you have done in that circumstances, in that situation? And what do you hear or see that the young man needs to do? So right now, he's in the midst of wanting to have peace of mind, but he doesn't have it because he's flipping and flopping. He's listening to other people. He's listening to their values. He's not paying attention to the things that he said core values for himself is to be out of debt, to enjoy life, to be free on his job, to learn to enjoy that and not worry about money. So now listen to this. If he is living above his means, then he has a whole idea about comfort. He has an idea about comfort in terms of others' expectations about where he lives, because comfort does not look at extravagance necessarily. So now we know that his values are extravagance, what other people think about how large it is, how nice it looks, rather than a small, neat little place. But I could then have an extra $1,000, and I could also have my truck to earn extra money so that I could be more independent. But that's difficult when your feelings are all scattered. And so he explained that his feelings were scattered for different reasons. Okay. But I'm listening to hear from you for next week to see what you think. So now we want to go back to something we discussed earlier. Whether we're talking about time, money, relationships, any of that, they're all related. Because we either feel comfortable with who we are, and we either accept to know ourselves, our individual, our family, our culture. And when you hear that you're not bringing your family and your culture together within yourself, then you know that your decisions are inconsistent. So to have your decisions consistent, I'll ask you a little question. If I say, when you go to the doctor, what do you expect? Write down the first thing that comes to your mind. If you think of a teacher, what do you expect? Write down the first thing that you think. When you think of money, if somebody asks you about the appropriate amount of money that you need, write down what you think it should be. If a religious leader or a nurse, write down what you think about that person or that position. Those are your expectations. And generally, your expectations create different assumptions. You have some assumptions based on your previous experiences about what should and ought to happen. How to change assumptions when you do not need, when they're negative assumptions. So let's look at your assumptions. If your assumptions that you hold now do not take you to the place that's consistent with your values, that's consistent with your personal values, your work values, your community values, then what's going on? Those assumptions are not healthy for you. Now they may be healthy for someone else, but they're not healthy for you because you're not necessarily achieving your goal. You're not going where you want to go. You're not feeling consistent mind, body, connected mind, body, and spirit. And you hear people all the time, I just feel so rattled. I feel upset. I feel frustrated because they haven't taken time to look at their boundaries, looking at their assumptions, look at their values. Now, your assumptions, that we have and our experiences connect to create our expectations. Every time we open our mouth, we tell about our expectations. When we know that something is supposed to happen, one of the things that I have is once I make an agreement, then come hell or high water, I am to think about my agreement prior, to look at all what might happen, to look at what I can put in place to make sure it happens, and then communicate it to the other person what I will do, can do, and cannot do. And if I say that I can do something, then I am to make sure that, barring any life crisis or whatever, that I do that. That's a value. And the assumption is from the other person is that I will do that because of the consistency of the behavior that I have explained or expressed or the actions. So, one of the things that we pay attention to, and we want to go back to what we discussed earlier, that all of the assessments, the expressions, the assumptions, we're going to describe it this way. Our experiences in the past bring forth what we think now. They bring forth our values, how we grew up, how what we observed as a young person, what we observe now, and we're constantly, as an adult particularly, or youth, reevaluating what we see. I have some young people who really are observant, and they'll say that, they're telling me this, but they're not consistent because they're telling me one thing and they're doing another thing. So what we say is expected to be consistent with what we do. And so when I talked earlier, I was saying that our values, when not aligned, mind, body, spirit, when we do not protect our boundaries and not go too far away from what we believe, and we protect them in terms of how we communicate with assertiveness and expectations expressed to other people, then we're off balance. And we need to bring ourselves back to balance. So when our experiences come to us, we then think about them in a similar way. So when you see that your assumptions are not taking you where you are, we need to then what? Back up and move to the thoughts that we bring in to our mind. And remember, the brain is a little bit different than the mind. The brain is the function chemically, neurologically, it's an organ. The mind brings into the values, the feelings, expectations, all of that, and the beliefs that we have. And we can change both of those because the neurological pathways in our brain tends to be influenced by the thoughts that we have and groove new neural pathways as we think about thoughts. So then, who's in charge? Whatever we believe is higher than who we are, that gives us our beliefs, in addition to our experiences, tend to put us in charge. So when we say, I'm thinking this and it's bringing me lower, it makes me feel bad because they did it to me. Then did they really do it to you? No, they did not do it to you. You perceived it. You actively perceived it by integrating what you had seen before without sieving it, without passing through any kind of evaluation mechanism, without even regrooving your brain, without questioning, did that assumption or behavior work for me? If it didn't work for you, do you want to say that's just the way I am? That's the way I usually do it? Because then you're giving away what? All the power that you have to grow and make changes. But if you go back and say, I must rethink this, I did not feel comfortable with this. I'm not aligned mind, body, and spirit. I feel out of sorts with this. So let me go back and see how I can rethink this. I must find in all of those things that did not work, I must find in there my participation, one, and I must go back into there and pull out all of the positiveness of that negative experience. So now what I do is I have the capability of making all of those negative experiences a positive. I can make it transform. I can make it transformative. I can make it move from the past to the present. I can use it for my future. I can create in the moment a decision. I can talk to myself because now I know that I'm beginning to regroove my mind. I'm creating another track, another space, so to speak, with this thought. So I want to rethink the situation and use and practice using the new thought that I have about this. So instead of saying that my mother did this to me, I don't have control over myself at 5 years of age. I don't have control over myself at 10. So, what I used to say is, I was angry with my grandmother because she made me wear tight shoes. She was trying to get me ready for church, and I had to wear these little Buster Brown shoes with the strap on it, but they were a little too small. And she'd say, walk around the house, baby, walk around the house. I'd walk around the house to stretch the shoes. Well, what really happened was I created bunions. And those bunions on my feet taught me a lesson. As I looked at them, I knew that I had to do something about them. So I was angry because I was like, why would a relative, a grandmother, knowing all wise as she was, have me walk around the house with shoes too small? Well, one of the things that I found out is that during that time, many people had bunions because they had the opinion, the value of not wasting what you had and figuring out a way to use them. You would even see people cut the back out of their shoes or cut the toes out of the front of the shoes, many things. And so as I asked later on, I realized that people were doing the best job that they could do in the manner in which they could do it. So once you have a new way of understanding that, do you want to hold the anger at the person who was doing the best job that they could do just because it didn't fit with your new information? No, because you need to do what? In the moment. You have to make a decision for your peace of mind, for you in the present moment in time, to groove your brain to look at what you must do now. You have a choice in choices. You could either wear different shoes, you could have some shoes made for sure, you could have your feet changed, and that's what I did. I had surgery on my feet. So I chose to do that. Some people may not. Some people may use something to keep your feet from hurting, many other things. So back the main thought here is you can hold on to the negative principle that you have, the negative thought, or you can create an operative so that you can move forward. You can do some other things and create a good thought, align yourself, mind, body, and spirit. Decrease your stress, change your assumptions, because automatically your assumptions will change with more positive thinking. Some people allow their emotions, the feelings about a situation to take over. So we need to have what? A balance between our thoughts, whether it's logical, and our emotions. When the emotions take over, your feelings dictate your actions. And when feelings dictate your actions, that's where impulsivity many times can happen. And we know with impulsive type behavior, we can have detrimental emotions, detrimental actions. And what we want to do is to have our actions reflect what? Our values, our healthy assumptions. And we want our behaviors to be systematic. So all we're talking about today is to look at every situation that we have and to look at the amygdala, our emotions when there's pain, when we overload ourselves with that. We're not what? Able to sleep. We're hyper vigilant. We're angry. We're frustrated. We just can't be settled. And so there's just so many things that it leads to. So when we're looking at how all of this relates to our behaviors and our actions, we need to just look at being in the moment and relax and breathe. And we know that once we have a new thought and relax, and we then tend to breathe and give ourselves that settled feeling, then we're able to balance our thoughts and we can be there to make good, appropriate decisions and protect our boundaries and our next move. When our next move is not validated, you are going to have difficulty sleeping, because sleep is a time when everything comes together to heal and to get you reset for the next moment, next awakening time. But if your mind is unsettled, it's still on that being unsettled. Now, what do you think is going to happen? Because you have an active brain. You're going to be what? Thinking about exactly what was unsettled, whether you're aware of it or not. It'll either come through dreams, nightmares, and thoughts early morning. What I tell people to do, and they laugh, I say, get up in the morning, very first thing, and write down what it is that your mind was on, what you remember. You may not remember it all, but that's very important to remember to do, because that's going to help you figure out what it is you're holding on to that's not resolved and what it is that you need to bring to the present. See how everything is all connected? Everything is all connected. And so when you feel yourself hypervigilant, it means that you most times, if you're not otherwise neurologically off balance, it is that you're going too far in the future. It is that you're not paying attention to the balancing in the moment for sure. Okay, and so you want to come back, and I have people to tap their feet, to hum, to do a lot of different interventions to bring yourself back to the moment. So there are many things that we could talk about today. We could talk about how food intake, and maybe the next time we'll look at that, how food intake is so much related to um, our irregularity of our thoughts and what we can do about that. But the main thing I want to leave you with today is to focus on mind, body, and spirit. Focus on your assumptions that you have. And you have some family assumptions. You want to write down your family assumptions that you hold on to, your family values and beliefs, and look at how you think about things. You want to then look at your cultural, your community. What do they say? What do they approve of? How are you different than your culture around you? And look at how you think of yourself. Those are some real important things to do, because it dictates not only our eating, it dictates how we spend money, it dictates what we spend money on, how we eat, all of those things. And our next opportunity to speak with each other, this is what we're going to look at. We will be looking at how holding on to many of these old thoughts can create anger. And then we want to identify, we'll be looking at ways in which you can handle that. We want to look at your own aggressive cycle. We all have many times our weak, strong periods. And people talk about signals, tags, or many things that you can recognize that's going to bring you to that moment. You see, for example, as I shared my value with you about myself being on time, myself doing things that I promised I would do. So the very thing works in the opposite. When people do not, it frustrates me, especially when they know it's important, especially if I'm talking children and adults. Also, if you move something, how come you don't put it back in place? If you've taken responsibility. Um, If your family makes statements about other people, I also have a value of not talking negatively about people. So if I say anything, it is going to be exactly what I say in front of the person themselves. So creating a standard for yourself is very important now, to do that so that you can stay in the center. So next time that we meet, we'll be talking about what creates all of these other behaviors. But right now, today, as I leave you, you will be looking at creating standards, what you believe, how you think your person behave for yourself. Now, you have to also allow other people to be who they are, because you have a choice to interact with them at what level. But they have a right to be who they are, as long as they're what? Not violating or hurting or harming you or persons you love or persons in the community. So for yourself, what you want to do is to begin to look at, who am I? What are my values? What am I going to do to create my standards? My standards for my action, my standards for inclusion, my standards for moving forward and for being here today. Thank you for being with me today, listening to me talk. And I tried to answer all of the questions in a discussion manner. And next time, I'm hoping I find a way that you can directly speak to me. And this is what I'm looking so forward to. And I'll be able to do that in the very near future. So I'm going to say, renew beliefs, rebuild faith, and reconnect families and communities. For it's not the circumstances we meet, it is the manner in which we respond that determines health, happiness, and success. You can go to our website, wrc-houston.com. Please register for our new class coming up in September for mental health coaches. We're doing really well on this class. This is our fifth class, and we're training people for the community so that we can bring more healing and health within the place that we serve. We want to change what the zip codes say. We want to give a new meaning to zip codes, because they're saying that where you live dictates your mental health. And we want to show that it can change if everybody connects together for good mental health. Okay, so I'll see you same time, same place, same station, God willing.